I'll call the meeting to order unofficially. It's a non-action meeting, at least non-action for those of us who are no longer members. It is 1:04 p.m. on Thursday, November 14th, 2024. I'll go ahead and just do roll call. Onauna Thone, former chair of the council. Mary, I'll go to you next.
Mary Bajere, former vice chair of the council, Hawaii Island representative.
Thanks, Mary. I'll go to Steph.
Steph Dunbar-Co, former member
Thanks,
of the Environmental Council.
Thanks, Steph. Michelle.
Michelle, current member of the council.
Thanks, Michelle. Tessie. Oh, you're on mute, Tessie.
Still learning.
Okay.
Tessie Kinnaman Toy.
Thanks, Tessie. Dawn.
Don Hager Nordblom, interim member until I get confirmed, I guess, again.
Thanks, Dawn.
Mhm.
Rachel.
Rachel Sprague, current member calling from Lanai.
Thanks, Rachel. All right, I'll go to ERP staff and director of OPSD.
Go ahead. Tom Eisen, staff with the environmental review program.
Mary Alice Evans, current director of the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development.
Okay, thanks, Mary Alice. Allison.
Allison Cato, Deputy Attorney General.
Okay, great. And Jay did email back. He said he is trying to get into the Zoom now. So see him, please let him in. Okay, so as we started off, we kind of rejiggered our agenda to start off with more of the transition stuff, partly because I misread my own chart and I thought that we were terming off on November 16th, but it's actually November, I think it was November 4th and November 3rd, and the 16th, I was looking at 2016 for the appointment date. So that was my mistake. And I know people were traveling and whatnot. So this is our last meeting, and unfortunately, a bunch of us have termed off, but do want to thank everybody for still joining so that we can transition to the other existing members and Jay when he gets on. So we do have one new member coming on. So thank you folks, everybody, for bearing with us these last couple of months. And, I was really hesitant to call meetings in the last couple of months where we didn't have substantive council business. I know everybody's really busy, especially as the year starts to wind up. But it is good that we got Dawn reappointed finally, and Jay was appointed. So thanks very much to ERP and Mary Alice's efforts to get them to do that. And there was one other person who did put her application in, Ruby Papp, and I actually reached out to her. So it sounds like boards and commissions did reach out to her a little bit ago, but she was going through some things, and so the timing wasn't right. But she said that she is still interested. And so I'll continue. Hi, Jay. Okay, so Jay, we actually just went through our introductions. If you don't mind just introducing yourself for the record.
Hi, I'm Jay Stone. I'm newly on the council, recently appointed.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, welcome. We're so happy that, boards and commissions through the efforts of ERP and Mary Alice were able to finally get you appointed to the council. We're hoping for it sooner, and unfortunately, it is the last meeting for many of us on this call because we actually termed out on November 4th. So we're technically not members anymore, but we still wanted to have, kind of a transition meeting with you. And Dawn actually just got reappointed as well. So Jay, just for your knowledge, so the remaining members are Dawn, Rachel, and Michelle, along with yourself, until we can get more members appointed. And then, yeah, Tessie, Mary, myself, and Stephanie have all termed off. But if you folks, I'll speak for myself. I don't know how others feel. Feel free to reach out to me with questions as the council moves forward. I'm happy to join some meetings as a member of the public to the extent you folks need me. So what I was saying before Jay showed up was that there is one other application in the pipeline. So again, boards and commissions actually reached out to her. Timing wasn't right for her. And so she would still be interested, and I can pass that information on to Mary Alice and the new chair. One of the questions was, and I know we've had many months of kind of going through our own strategic planning is, what's the role of the council moving forward? And especially with how, difficult it was to get members appointed the last couple of years. I don't know, Mary Alice, if you have any information that you can share with us about, I guess, what the state has in mind for the council, what OPSD has in mind. Because, I think, a lot of us were going through recruiting efforts. I've reached out to a few attorneys to try to keep an attorney on the council, but unfortunately no takers at this time. But I also am not pushing super hard because I just don't know whether the state wants to keep us around or not, to be candid. And so, yeah, any information you can share on that?
Okay, yes, the state definitely wants to keep the council alive and active. There's been a very big change over at the governor's office in that the new special advisor for policy has added staff to boards and commissions. Prior to this, it was one person, and they, obviously having a hard time keeping up with the process of reviewing applications for the over 200 boards and commissions throughout the state and getting those applications up to governor for his appointment. With that additional staffing to boards and commissions, I think we can be more hopeful that that important function for keeping the board membership at a active and healthy level can move forward. I'm encouraged. I'm optimistic. From the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development's perspective, this council is really important because this is such a the Chapter 343 function is a critical part of our state process, state and county process for looking at actions by state and county agencies with state and county land and state and county money and other particularly sensitive types of actions that may have significant adverse impacts on our environment, that it absolutely needs the advice and thoughts of people who work with this statute on a regular basis or are impacted by that or have a stakeholder's view in protecting something that could be impacted, have an adverse impact by actions by state and county agencies. So I thank you for the ones of you who are still eligible to be on the council. Thank you, Jay, for applying. And I will be working with the governor's office to try to get those additional people appointed. They do need to get applications in through the governor's website, as Jay already knows, and the rest of you do. So that's somewhere that all of us can help if we will keep putting it in our quarterly newsletter that goes out to a blast list of, I think, several thousand. And it'll also be in the environmental notice, which has a large, how many people on that blast?
1,300.
1,300. So we will try to keep reminding people that this is a great opportunity to help, shape development by state and county agencies in Hawaii.
Okay, good. That's very, promising and encouraging to hear, Mary Alice. So thank you for working with Gov's office again. And so, yeah, I guess putting the call back out to the remaining members and even those who have termed off, reaching out to contacts and encouraging folks to apply so that we can.
As you, would it be possible to get the Bar Association's division for environmental law to put a notice on their website.
Mhm.
Or if they have a way of communicating with their division members.
Yeah, I can have them. I don't know if the environmental law section has its own website, but they have a listserv, and I can reach out to the current chair and ask, them to send out a call for
That'd be-
folks to apply. Yeah.
That'd be great.
Okay.
And if any of you, the rest of you, think of organizations that have a listserv, we can provide the language. And that would, and of course, it's the one that's in the environmental notice.
Mhm.
So all of you actually have that language as well. And does it have a link to the governor's boards and commissions
Yeah, multiple links.
applications?
Yes, yes.
It does. So that
Yeah.
makes it easy for people. If they're reading it online and it has the link and it's a live link, all they have to do is click on it.
Yeah, if you don't mind providing that to me, because I can provide it also to Dave Foreman at the law school and ask if
Oh,
they
good
send
idea.
the environmental law program actually has a really big listserv as well.
Great, great.
So it includes, alumni and students.
Super.
Okay.
I think for those of us, I mean, it's good to hear, Mary Alice, that the state feels there is a need. I went back and revisited the notes from our April 5th, 2022 meeting, which was when Robin walked us through the outcome of the strategic planning session. And those notes are really, really great. And the way that Robin sort of organized, everyone's thoughts and, on what the council's statutory requirements, responsibilities, and priorities are. And I don't know if we want to get into that now, but I think it'd be worth talking more about how we would help. I mean, I think everyone here agrees that 343 rules are important, but maybe it's worth taking a little bit of time now, thinking about, especially as we think about recruiting, how does this council support it? How would this council support it? I mean, I think we've spent at least the 2 years I've been on the council, trying to find our way after, what was it, Act 152? And, losing the rulemaking authority, which I think was a, big part of what, the previous members of the council had worked on, as well as, public outreach and doing legislative review. But with such a small group now, and I guess regardless of the group size, I think better defining how the state sees this council fulfilling those requirements, I think would help a lot. Those of us that are still on and anyone we would hope to recruit, because besides exemptions, I'm not really sure what that means.
Yeah, Michelle, would you be, since you have those meeting minutes up, I mean, it isn't on our agenda today to go over the EAC role and responsibilities, because again, it is a transition meeting, and even though you, Dawn, and Rachel have been on for a long time, it's Jay's first time. So do you want to maybe read through that, if you don't mind? We'll take the time to go through that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So the
Sorry,
first
Michelle, what meeting was this? This was April 23rd,
April 5th, 2022.
2022. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I think that was right about when Rachel, Dawn, and I joined. Or Dawn, did you come after that? It was.
I think Dawn was on before that, right?
Oh, Dawn was on before. Okay.
Sorry. I think I was,
So one of the things he discussed before we even got into the statutory requirements was the discussion of the results of the strategic planning survey. So this was a survey that the previous council had done, reaching out to constituent state leaders and organizations on their expectations for the council, as the council sought to define itself, and what they received in terms of comments. Again, this isn't tied to statutory requirements or responsibilities, but what stakeholders thought was that the EAC should hold agencies and decision makers accountable work with agency staff and community members, review and evaluate each EA, EIS, and FONSI to see how well it conforms with 343, examine EAs and EISs to determine whether promises made had been kept, assess the quality of work of consultants. The council should be the group that represents the protection of the environment. The council should help ensure rules affecting our environment are enforced. So just based on a survey, that's what folks thought that the council should do. Those are not the responsibility of the council, which then led to many discussions that we had as a group. Well, how do we define ourselves? This is what folks are expecting that the council do. What is it that we do? And so that moved into a discussion where Robin broke down and discussed HRS 341.6 into criteria. First point was that the advisory council, as stated in the statute, the advisory council shall serve as a liaison between the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development and the general public by soliciting information, opinions, complaints, recommendations, and advice concerning ecology, environmental quality, and through public hearings or other means. And at that time, we discussed how INO, the Information Outreach Committee, satisfied that part of the statutory requirement by holding webinars and other information sessions for the public. We discussed more about how we could do that differently or better or more or less. But, how do we identify topics? But, to satisfy that part of the statutory requirement, we thought that's where INO fit in. The next part of the statute said that the EAC should may make recommendations concerning ecology and environmental quality to OPSD and shall meet at the call of the council chairperson or the director of OPSD upon notifying the council chairperson. I don't think we decided how we do that. I mean, I think there were a lot of conversations we had in committees and I think as the council as a whole, but on what authority and within what parameters we would make recommendations concerning ecology and environmental quality were never, I think, established.
Yeah.
Agree.
And I'll add to that. So we did have subsequent discussions, in particular post-August 2023, right, where I know Mary Alice, as director of OPSD, you've asked certain questions to the council in terms of supporting OPSD specifically on items. I think we talked, and it came up again in the exemption committee meeting today about, after action reports, right, for emergency actions and those types of things. And so I think what we decided some months ago was, of course, that, if there's a specific question, as, all of us have very different backgrounds. And rather, we went through a whole thing about, do we have to have a formal process for OPSC to ask us questions? And where we ended up was Mary Alice, of course, attends these meetings. And so that's one forum. But the other way is for her to contact specific individuals for their expertise whenever she has questions as well. And so I think in that sense, we are somewhat fitting into this part of the statutory directive, although it's not necessarily always just specific information on, ecology and environmental quality. I mean, I can't give you too many recommendations personally on ecology, but others on this call are much more, better suited to do that, right?
Maybe maybe we should just ask Jay what his understanding is of being on the council.
Yeah, actually, before we do that, can I have Michelle just go through the last part of this? I think there's just one more point, and then
one more point that we discussed as part of the statute, and that was that the EAC shall monitor the progress of the state, county, and federal agencies in achieving the state's environmental goals. That's a shall monitor. and it shall submit its report and recommendations for improvements concerning ecology and environmental quality to OPSD, which shall include the report and recommendation in its annual report to the legislature. And I think that also we have talked about a lot, but I don't think we, we have our annual report, which is really just a summary of, what all the different committees had done, but with a much smaller council now, I don't envision that we will all be able to do all those committees. And so now should the annual report take a different direction that meets this requirement of monitoring the progress. We talked about other, I think, departments that at the time, Scott Glenn was on the call and discussed the metric systems they developed by cross-referencing the Aloha Plus Challenge, Sustainable Development Goals, and Governor's Sustainable Hawaii Initiative. So there are other folks tracking these things, and I don't think we came to resolution on how the council might meet this.
Yeah, and this one's a little bit of I guess there's some sensitivity with this particular statutory, directive to the council, right? Where the council, we're volunteers, and kind of, have this directive to be watchdogs for agencies, which is tough with, again, council has zero budget and zero dedicated staff, although we have a ton of help from, ERP and OPSD, right? So this one is interesting, and I don't know what the legislative intent was at the very beginning to have the volunteer group, if it was just neutrality. But again, without having kind of a budget to do it, it does take a lot of effort. So I think the closest we came to it, at least in the years that I've been on the council, was several years back when we did the annual report. We decided to select 5 agencies to go and interview, and that took the in-person interviews took a long time, a couple of months scheduling. I think we were able to do maybe 3 or 4 in person, and then like Roy and I went and met with these agencies, and then I think maybe 1 or 2 decided only to do the questionnaire, right? But it was a significant effort just to do it for 5 agencies. To have to do it for every single agency in the state would be a full-time position for somebody. So this is one, maybe in future discussions of thinking of the council, maybe we either need more legislative guidance or on what their expectation is, and maybe a budget and dedicated staff for that. Because for a volunteer group to do this, we meet once a month and everybody has full-time jobs, right? So it's a huge effort. So thankfully there are other ways to do it. I mean, I can't say that, we've been meeting our what we're supposed to do on this specific end to the T, but it is just practically speaking something very, very difficult to do. And so I don't know that, plus I don't know how much agencies really like it. So the way that we approached it when we did the annual report was, tell us what's kind of your authority, what are your challenges, and what could help you do your job better, right? Or like how, help you meet those goals. And all 5 agencies said we need more money and we need more staff. Really, that was kind of the issue. Right, which is not groundbreaking. I mean, so to spend all this time, months going through and interviewing these agencies for them to say, we need more money, we need more time. I don't know that that's the best use of our time either. Right, because we definitely know that everybody's understaffed, everybody's underfunded. So yeah, this one is a little bit of a tough one. I mean, nobody's really come down on us to say, hey, you're not doing what you're supposed to do on this particular issue. And I don't know that, I mean, this particular section that portion wasn't changed when we were transitioned from the council who had rulemaking authority to an advisory council. But yeah, to the extent, the current council now wants to make some changes or bring that up to the legislature, that's a point that you could talk about. I just don't, again, I don't know how or if that's something we even want to do, or if it's appropriate for an advisory volunteer board to be doing that rather than like an internal audit department of the state. Kind of seems more appropriate.
The Office of Planning and Sustainable Development doesn't have the capacity to do that. And we have staff of, 39. But all assigned to specific programs or specific federal grants. They're not a pool of, assignable folks. So, yeah, I do think that either has to be very selective. In other words, the council sees a problem, and tries to delineate it for the legislature, rather than doing a global monitoring approach. I mean, we couldn't do it, and I don't know of any department that can do that. It's huge. Plus, when I look at your significance criteria, I think there's close to 10 of them. They cover such a wide range of significant adverse impacts, different types of impacts that are defined in 343 as being environmental, but they're not all about natural resources. There's culture, there's the economy. It's really too broad for a monitoring program. It is something that I would guess that one thing the council could do that would be helpful would be to be listening to the kinds of challenges that state and county and private applicants are having working with Chapter 343, and then letting the legislature know where the chapter might need to be amended to address those challenges. The rule rewrite that you guys did addressed a lot of them. It made it much clearer, much easier to comply, so that there was less gray areas that could be used to challenge the compliance of a particular EA or EIS with Chapter 343 and 11200. So 11200.1 is much better, but there's the environment is changing. Climate change brings change, and so there will be new areas that maybe need to be addressed by either rule changes if they're fit within 343 or statutory amendments. It's a more targeted approach, I think, than just sort of general monitoring.
Go ahead, Steph.
Thank you for that, Mary Alice. I agree, and I like your suggestion for where the council could more appropriately focus. Just echoing what Onauna shared as the chair of this committee for many years, the annual report has been a huge struggle. And I think that this, what we're sort of legislatively mandated to do around the annual report absolutely needs to be revisited. And we've gone up and down with that as a council. And I don't think there can be a more sort of clear example of how this sort of guideline cannot be met than by the simple fact that our council is now, members 4 people. So I would highly recommend that get changed, not just because it's simply not doable for a volunteer advisory board. It's also not appropriate. And I would hate for in some sort of back locker of the state to think that, oh, the environmental council is doing this. Nobody else kind of needs to do this, or this is assigned to somebody else, because this is really super important. Somebody should be high level looking across departments at the state of our environment. But that's not the EC. So again, that would be an added benefit of having this conversation with our legislators and changing this language, in my opinion.
They're really good suggestions, Steph.
Mhm.
So, thank you, Michelle, for going through that. And I shared the link to those meeting minutes in the chat if folks wanted to take a look at it themselves. I know, Don, you had asked Jay what he thought the council should do, and I don't want to put you, it's not a pop quiz, Jay, but maybe instead we can ask you the question of what was your interest in joining the council? And just give us a little bit of background on yourself before we move on to, kind of the rest of our transition items.
Okay, so Roy Abe, I've known him for a long time. When his term ended, he had reached out to me and kind of explained what the council does. I looked into it and he asked, would I be interested in contributing to, being on the council and contributing to it. And I said, yeah, sounds good to me. And then I applied. So I've attended a few other meetings, trying to understand what's going on, looking at the website and then looking at some of the meeting minutes, not too many of them. And I just I'm a civil engineer. My interest is related to the one water principle, where any form of water is useful for the public. So I'm in general interested in things like ecosystem restoration, proper stewardship of water, and things like that. So my thought is, as an engineer, and because of my experience in some ecosystem restoration in bringing together kind of a integrated approach to infrastructure and development, that's where I could probably assist and look at it from that point of view of whatever our duties are. My initial reaction is, I think the council is kind of setting itself up if we try to do everything that was listed in those meeting minutes. And I think really the issue is to try and focus in on, what can we do? There's it's what are we required to do, right? And then what can we do to meet that requirement? And how do you fit that in with what can be done, right? Because we're a volunteer council and we're in an advisory role, I'm not sure how the annual report or some of the duties would fit into that advisory role, right? In terms of what the actual deliverables are. So I think trying to look at what the actual deliverable needs to be on an annual basis or quarterly basis that would be useful to the state is, I think, what we need to try and focus on. I don't know what that is right now, since I'm still trying to get to understanding what the council does, right? I definitely think, when you look at the survey, right? Review and evaluate each EAEIS FONSI as to how well it conforms to HRS 343, Chapter 11, 200.1. I do not have the time for that. I just don't.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to really be, I think with much candor is this is the set of tasks that can be done and are appropriate for the mission of the council, whatever that is. I don't know what that is right now. And I don't want to come in and as the new person say, oh, it should be like this, or whatever. I don't know. Right. And I defer to others of what they think is the priority that we should do, and then provide input of whether or not that makes sense, and then how do we accomplish that? Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you, Jay. And yeah, we're not expecting you to come in and say, hey, this should be our mission. Don't worry, because as these meeting minutes show, I mean, that's why we had a strategic planning committee, is because after post rulemaking, right, we did have a little bit of, that was such a huge effort that took up, 2.5, 3 years of our time, that when it ended, it was kind of a, identity crisis in a sense, where we're like, okay, now what do we do? What do we focus on? So let's go back to the statute. What are we supposed to be doing? And exactly what you said, what can we actually do? So I think now's a good time. Maybe I'll just briefly highlight post rulemaking. This is what we have been doing. I think one of the most important things that we've been doing is to continue to review exemption lists for agencies, right? Because that's just something that comes in. I think we get, I don't know, Michelle, six to eight lists per year potentially, and part of that is because when the rules were updated, there was kind of a 7-year period implemented where we've asked agencies to come in to update their lists. Under the new rules, we created a mechanism for Part 1 and Part 2 exemptions, with Part 1 exemptions really being de minimis. And you're not required to submit a list of those exemptions to the ERP for publication. And all the Part 2 stuff is supposed to be submitted. I know not all agencies do it, but there's a pretty good amount of agencies who do. And so that's kind of I would say maybe one of the most substantive things we've been doing for the council is continuing to work with agencies on exemption lists. And I do think that's an important function for the council to maintain going forward.
It's in
Go ahead,
the
Michelle.
rules as well. It's not required for us. Agencies aren't required to submit their lists for us for publication, but it is encouraged. So again, one of those things that not that we're required to do, but yeah, we serve a function there.
Mm-hmm. And then the other more substantive things that we've been doing is, with the information and outreach committee, setting up the forums and whatnot, on, migratory bird or seabirds and those types of topics, right? And so holding those forums for the public. And I would like to see, I think, both of those things continue. We're about 5 years. Yeah, I think August made 5 years since the new rules went into effect. And there are certainly some tweaks that can be made. So we've been trying to keep, somewhat of a running list with that. And Tom, even in the exemption committee today, we talked about potential things that we might see in a future rules update. So even though the council does not have rulemaking authority anymore, that authority now lies with OPSD. The council is required to be consulted on the rules. And I think, Mary Alice, we talked about this in the past. It probably would be the case where the council would still take the laboring oar on the rules with support of OPSD and ERP staff. Is that correct in terms of what you envision?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And so, especially with the process and the outreach that we did last time. And then coming to the annual report. So we did have some legislative success a couple years ago. And the reason it's still in the statute is that when we talked about it, there were certainly some members who were like, just get rid of it. But there were also some members who felt very strongly about there being some kind of an annual report requirement. And so that's why it's still in there. Now membership has changed. So we leave it to the current membership if you want to pursue, further amendments to just delete it altogether. In its current form, we've just been kind of giving an update on what we've done. And I'll speak candidly because it's my last meeting and then not that I don't care. I do very much care, but I honestly don't know if anybody reads our annual report because of, the usefulness of it is certainly, it's not super useful in terms of what the annual report is supposed to cover. So that's something that can be considered going forward if you folks want to get rid of that requirement. If not, it's due, I think, January 30. So I'll go into the list of to-dos, kind of training the remaining members of like coming up. This is where we are in the year, and these are the types of things you should be doing. Am I missing anything, other members, of what the council has been doing? Okay, I guess the only other thing I would say is what we wanted to do, and what we're currently working on with ERP is the exemption guidance. So guidance, one of the things we really wanted to do after the rules came out and we had been asked was to kind of update the cultural guidance, right? Because I think it's 1997 is the cultural guidance for completing cultural impact assessments. We did have a prior member who had some contacts in that area, but unfortunately the effort just never took off. And so that, we haven't gotten any current requests to do it, but that is still something kind of on our list in terms of doing some substantive guidance for the rules, cultural mitigation measures, those types of things. Go ahead, Mary Alice.
What we're seeing is a broader adoption of the Kapa'akai criteria that the state Supreme Court handed down. And because their decision was so broad that it means that, you know, almost any action taken by a state or county agency must have a Kapa'akai analysis, and it must be done by the board issuing a permit or taking an action. I would want to see the council take a look at the Kapa'akai decision and then try to align their recommendations on cultural impact statements with that, so that we don't have two separate requirements that may overlap, but are, you know, different enough that they require, you know, two different documents.
Okay.
There, the way that agencies are interpreting it is also differently, especially as it relates to 343. I know I've worked with agencies where in some cases they want the KPK analysis laid out in the 343 document, and others and the CIA, and some not, you know, depending on how they interpret the rules, and either put the burden on the 343 document or on, you know, the agency itself to conduct that analysis. So it would be a tricky endeavor, I think, going down that road, and we would definitely need legal support, I think, for any, as well as, yeah.
Okay. Thanks,
Michelle,
Michelle.
I think that makes my point. It's tricky.
Steph, go ahead.
Yeah, just it is, and I think it's also pretty necessary, but would just intuitively highly recommend that folks with that cultural expertise be members on this council.
Yeah, and we've been trying to recruit a practitioner for many years without luck. So I leave that to the remaining members. If you folks have contacts who are interested, who would want to serve on the council, I think that's necessary, and that's part of the reason, you know, the cultural guidance didn't take off. One of our former members, you know, they had contacts at the law school. We wanted to do a more targeted kind of outreach, say, hey, we're thinking of, so stepping back, the council itself and the membership, we had decided that, especially without having a practitioner on the council, we weren't the body really to issue the guidance alone. So what we wanted to do was facilitate bringing the right parties to the table, including members at the law school, OHA, DHHL, you know, other groups, right? That makes sense. So that's how we viewed our role, as being, okay, we'll get everybody together and let's talk about it. And the thought was, this is going to be a huge undertaking. I don't think it's even something that could get done in 1 year if you're going to do it right. I think you can make a lot of headway in a year, but it's not something you're going to rush through in like 2 months, for example. Start with a smaller group of kind of the main folks. Maybe now CNHA could come to the table, or whoever else. Talk to them about who else do we need to involve, and then open it up to a bigger group when you have a more targeted framework of, this is what we need to do with guidance. Get the folks who come in and do cultural impact assessments and archaeology reports, right? So I put that to this group of remaining members of, I think that is still important, because again, now that guidance is the oldest guidance, now that the rules have been updated. On the Kapa'akai issue, so to me, the framework is pretty clear, but I see your point out, making sure there's not two separate requirements. So the current cultural impact assessment guidelines are just that. You do not have to do a CIA following those guidelines, although they were concurred with, or they were approved by the council. So that has generally been the accepted method of doing a cultural impact assessment, although there have also been criticisms of that guidance in terms of it not being enough. And that's why we're thinking of looking at it, right? So those are more the procedural guidelines of how do you do a cultural impact assessment. For me, at least the way I interpret Kapa'akai, right? There's 3 things you got to do, and you only have to do it if you're going to impact cultural resources and practices. If your project does not impact it, you do not need to do that, right? But if you do, you have to first inventory the practices and resources, identify what impacts your action is going to have on those inventory and resources, and if they are going to have impacts, how do you mitigate, right? It's those 3 things. And so I've worked with clients, and again, like Michelle, I've seen it where Kapa'akai analyses are put into the CIA and the EIS, even in applicant actions, in an effort to make it easier for the agency. But agencies cannot delegate it. You know, we've worked with some, and I kindly remind them, like, no, this is your kuleana. You have to make specific findings on these issues to comply with what's in Kapa'akai. But as an applicant, for example, you are responsible for making sure the agency has the information they need in order to do that analysis, right? So I think that's the overlap. I don't see the guidelines, I don't see it as being 2 separate requirements, right? Because the court requirements are the court requirements, and that's what the agency has to do. But the guidelines would be, in a way, the procedural of how do you make sure you capture this information in a correct manner. That's at least kind of how I view it. I don't know if others have other thoughts on that. So I know we'll have this in the minutes, and I'm sorry to leave the future council with, again, a lot of work. I mean, there is a lot of good work to be done, but those are one of the things. So I know we had as a second bullet point, because I do want to go through, okay, hey guys, this is a schedule. We're in November. These are the things we start doing. Do you guys want to do that first? As a second bullet point, we had selection of the new chair. Do you want to do that now or after?
Do it now?
Yeah, okay. So those of us who are not members cannot decide that. I mean, does anybody want to be chair of the 4 members remaining?
Michelle?
Are there nominations? Yeah.
I would serve.
August.
Rachel? Jay?
Well.
Good job.
What? I'm sorry, I don't understand what's going on. I know we're trying to pick a chair.
Pick a new chairperson. Yeah, they threw your name in the hat. Although I think that's unfair to Jay to come in on his first day and have to be chair. We won't give you that.
It's okay.
That great honor.
I'm a consultant. I get thrown in the fire all the time.
Yeah, right.
It's all day. It's all day. Just another thing. It's just one more thing.
Yikes.
He might just have a good chair there if he's got that attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Not much phases me anymore. After 30 years, 31 years. It's just one other thing of the day to do. That's all.
Okay.
Although I do think that it makes more sense, just as advice, to choose someone who's been on the council longer. That makes a lot more sense to me. You know?
I think, yeah, I mean, I vote for someone, either Rachel or Michelle, because you guys are confirmed. I'm interim, so I'll be happy to be a second vice chair or something, but I think the chair needs to be someone who's going to be there and confirmed, unfortunately. Sorry.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense to me.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's
Rachel.
Michelle and Rachel.
I nominate, yeah, can I nominate someone? I'm gonna nominate Michelle. She's been
I
talking
second.
quite a bit.
I'll third.
Third, okay.
No, but Michelle, I don't like, I don't think any of us want to throw you entirely, under, like, if you haven't been able to say anything.
Yeah, I'm happy to serve. I'll admit that I'm nervous about the lofty goals, the wishes that what this council can do versus what's in the statute and what we can do as a volunteer group. So I guess that's my only hesitancy. It's not to be chair. I'm happy to serve as chair. I just I guess we can work as a group to shape this council, those remaining members, to what we feel is necessary and what we feel is possible moving forward.
Go ahead, Steph.
I think that's really awesome, Michelle. And I've always felt that EC is very lucky to have you, all of you. But so thank you. I would just really encourage you, because you are also the chair of the exemptions committee, and that is arguably the busiest committee. And so it might be worth you all divvying that up, because being chair of the council and chair of the exemptions committee is a lot.
Very good point, Steph.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, that Michelle and I have sort of overlapping, but sort of different specialties. Like Michelle is definitely has more experience in the 343 and exemptions realm. I have written some NEPA, like I have worked on some 343 and NEPA documents and figured out what exemptions to use, like in working for a private landowner and in working for the feds for a little bit. But I think I do a little bit more on the like implementation, like conservation and natural resource management on the ground side of things, and a little bit of strategy. And I don't know, but yeah, Steph, that's a good point. Like I think Michelle and I have a similar, like we are happy to, we would like to serve and help. We, as previously discussed, we both have full-time jobs and that are not small, and and would need support. But I also recognize that the exemptions committee is currently the one that has the most work, and that I would not feel confident unless Dawn wants to like take over the exemptions committee. Like I definitely would not feel comfortable taking over the exemptions committee. I think it's interesting to think about where the EAC could go. I think some of the things that like Onana and Jay have said around trying to take what is in that really broad, well, and Steph mentioned this, so like taking what's in that really broad mandate and thinking about like deciding what within that, maybe on an annual basis, we want to prioritize. Like we're not going to be able to weigh in on every environmental thing that the state is doing, but it's something I don't think we ever really had time to do, which is like as a council have like a brainstorming session of what are the top things people are worried about, and do we want to like vote on the top 3 for this year of like, what are we going to hold a forum on or two, and what do we want to spend a little bit of time trying to gather more information on? Because I don't see us being able to do, a whole lot more than that. And that would be even like aspirational with the 4 of us. So
Right.
That's not taking into account what Mary Alice is asking for, which is help identify deficiencies in right in the rules, and also right coordinate revising or updating the CIA guidance. I mean, any one of those things I'm not sure how we would do, and that's my hesitation, and that's my how do we take the expertise that we have, knowing that we have different areas. I mean, Don knows 343, Don knows permitting, but how do we take, not everyone's an expert in one area. And so how do we accomplish all these goals?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Don.
Is the chair, is it a fixed term? Like, can we all rotate chair,
No.
vice chair?
So,
I mean,
yeah, I was
maybe
gonna say there's nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is not a lifetime appointment. You can say I want to step down. The other thing is, and I was gonna ask Allison if you don't mind taking a look at HR's 341-5.5. So I don't know if maybe well, vice chair, I guess, is kind of like a co-chair, right? I mean, so the statute says that the chairperson shall be elected by the members. I don't know if that freedom to do co-chairs. I know we typically do have an election of the chair and the vice chair by the members. But yeah, I mean, I do agree and stuff. Thank you for bringing that up because I was very adamant when I was chair that I would not be exemptions committee chair. It was too much. So Michelle, defer to you on that. But I do think it's vital that you remain actually the exemptions committee chair since you have the most experience and Ron really transitioned you into the process of reviewing those exemption lists. But I do think you'd be a great council chair as well. So yeah, I mean, if there's an opportunity to be a co-chair, Don, I think the idea of rotating chair is good too. Or you guys can work out a schedule and just be like, hey, you know, Rachel is going to do, you know, EAC agendas, full EAC agendas on these months. Don will do it for this quarter. Michelle will do it for this quarter. I mean, honestly, I think there's flexibility unless Allison says otherwise to kind of do this however you folks want to do it. And then everybody kind of learns it. So,
that's fine. I'm fine with that.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So, you know, we're talking about exemptions committee, but what about like INO? Because Michelle's going to term off or Mary's going to term off. So how does this all work now? Like, are we just having one meeting for everything or?
You guys, that might work for a while. Well, it's just the four of you. Maybe you don't need to have separate committee meetings. I do think exemptions will probably still need to do a separate because typically when we do have agency folks show up for exemption meetings, we'll use the full hour going through a list. But I think, yeah, INO topics, legislative, instead of having separate committees for the time being, even annual report, because again, it's just the four of you, you can just handle it at full council. It doesn't have to be via committee. And then as membership grows, you can, you know, kind of restart those committees in the future. So I think there's flexibility for that. Go ahead.
Are those standing committees in 341?
Yep. So we have 6 standing committees, although I don't know if we actually formally so need it, but they are the annual report committee, information and outreach, exemptions, rules, legislative, and strategic planning. So rules committee, again, I don't know that that's a good committee to have, but I think that's one that can come up as needed. Sorry, do you guys still think about the chair thing? Because I can just go on to the list of things that need to be done and maybe at the end of the meeting, we come back to it. And I think Allison, you're still looking at whether or not we can do co-chairs.
I mean, I don't think that I'm not aware of anything that would prevent flexible arrangements. I mean, I have another board, they switch chairs every year. There's nothing in your statute I see that would prevent it.
Okay. Well, yeah, I was like, do we want to let's wrap up the chair conversation or co-chair, whatever, you know, the 4 of the remaining members want to do. And then we'll go back into the committees.
Onana, why don't you act as chair pro tem and conduct the election? For the minutes. For the minutes. Okay. Well, we had Michelle nominated as chair, it seemed like, but again, with the discussion on exemptions or not, I guess, do we want to should we vote on having one chair or co-chairs? What's the correct way to do this type of a vote? So for the record, I was voluntold I had to be chair. So this is different for me. These options were not available. And thankfully Mary stepped up to be vice chair. So
because Mary was voluntold too. And
okay.
With you and Joseph sitting there across the table from me saying, You won't ever have to do anything. We just need to copy you sometimes on some minutes.
Yeah, I think I had you conduct one meeting that I couldn't attend,
Yeah,
right?
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
And I am not complaining. I appreciate having that title by my name. So, and all the things I learned and did on this council, I really wish we could have finished up differently. There's so many things that we aspire to do.
So many meetings we wanted to have.
Yeah, seriously, there
Right.
were.
We had some good meetings planned.
yeah, likewise. So again, excuse my ignorance on how to conduct the election for chair. Is there a suggestion from you, Mary Alice or Allison, on the way to do this? Just because again, I kind of walked in the room that day and they're like, Joseph's leaving, your chair. Okay. No,
I-
you can't,
As opposed to
Yeah.
voluntold, some boards and commissions do, the chair pro tem entertains a motion, closes the nominations if there's a second, and then takes a vote, and then announces the results, and you know how to do that.
Okay. All right, well, I will entertain a motion then for either a chair or whatever the member's heart desires. Co-chair.
Co-chair. I think that's easier on Michelle.
So Rachel and I co-chair,
Or we all co-chair. I
or
don't
we
know.
all co-chair. You said
Yeah.
that you weren't sure if, since you were interim. I mean, happy to try.
I mean,
try
you know,
chair.
I'm fine helping. It's just I'm a little worried that come legislative session, we slide by again. So
Mhm.
And I mean, I would chair if like Dawn or Michelle would co-chair and maybe that would be a way to spread I mean, if Michelle's the exemptions committee chair as the
Yeah.
kind of only acting committee and Dawn would vice chair it. I don't mind co-chairs also. It just I have been in situations where it sort of needs to have the roles and responsibilities sort of well laid out. I'm not worried about Michelle or Dawn like disappearing
Power
and
grabbing,
not doing anything. But
Okay.
Yeah. I nominate Rachel as chair.
Okay. Any further nominations? Okay,
chair or co-chair? Sorry.
Oh,
Is
for-
that chair or co-chair?
Well, I guess I move to
nominate. Yeah, so I think what I just heard was regular one chair with a vice chair or coach, right? And Michelle stays as exemptions. Is that correct? I don't want to take chair away from anybody who wants chair or vice chair, right? You guys got to tell me. I'm just chair.
Okay, so Rachel would be chair and Michelle co-chair. Is that what we're voting on?
Oh, I was going to nominate you as vice chair.
Oh, okay. That's fine. You can nominate me as vice chair. Okay, so are we concentrating on Michelle as chair
of exemption.
Rachel.
of exemption?
Yeah, and Michelle would stay as chair of exemptions.
Oh, okay. Second.
Okay. Nominations are closed. So just to be clear, the motion is for Rachel as chair, Dawn as vice chair, Michelle to stay as exemptions chair. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. And all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, it's unanimous. Congratulations, everybody. You now have a new chair. And Rachel, if you have a new chair, you have a new vice chair and another confirmed exemptions chair. Sorry, Michelle, you're still stuck with exemptions.
Right.
If Chair Rachel, if you're okay with me just kind of continuing to lead through this meeting for purposes, and then you get it after this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. That was a good discussion, and Steph, thanks you for raising the double chair issue because that is difficult. So going back to where we were, which were the standing committee. So we have 6 standing committees: annual report, information and outreach, exemptions, rules, legislative, and strategic planning. Exemptions is the main committee right now that is currently active, and it's active year round. In a normal year, information and outreach is also active year round. Rules is really only active when we have kind of rulemaking. Legislative committee is active kind of from around now through the legislative session. And then annual report usually starts about October-ish, September, October through end of January and stuff.
It depends on how ambitious you want to be.
Yeah.
My suggestion is you not be ambitious, and in fact, you get rid of that. So yeah, October at least, because you need to go through drafts and that needs to come to the full
Yeah.
council.
Thank you. And then strategic planning committee, we set it up as a regular standing committee. It has not been active since I think April or May or so, maybe. Or no, maybe that's not correct. Trying to think. It's been a little bit of time because we kind of we had that great discussion in 2022. We had some further discussions, but with the dwindling membership and not getting more appointments, it did fall off a little. So I think that can be reactivated. But again, given that there's only 4 members, what I would suggest, with the exception of exemptions committee, is just adding agenda items on the full council, allowing for time to talk about, you know, legislative annual report information and outreach. So certainly for the December meeting, you should have an annual report item. I will share, you know, the Word documents that we have for the last 2 annual reports are really just reports of what did we do this year. Very simple. I think it was 2 to 3 pages maximum. And then at least for this year, we'll still go with our former process of submitting it to Mary Alice, and let me know when you, oh gosh, we're already a month behind on this. Apologies, guys, because we didn't have some meetings. Let us know when you need it, because I know OPSD will accommodate us by helping us to file it.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Technically, our deadline, I think, is January 30th or 31st.
If it's January 30, at the end of January, then maybe January 15th, which gives you 2 meetings. You know, one for a draft and the second one to finalize. And then you can get it to us after the January meeting. But that is if you decide to hold a December meeting. I have to say, a lot of boards and commissions, you know, do not have a December meeting. So I think that's a discussion that comes up at the end of your agenda. Is there a next meetings?
Correct.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, we do have
one.
I have a tentative, and we typically do hold a December meeting because of when the annual report and to, which I'll get into, discussion with legislators for the upcoming legislative session. But again, that's at, you know, the chair's pleasure going forward, and the council's. So.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So I assume that there's no draft of the annual report that's been written for this year?
No,
Yeah.
but even last year, we didn't do too much. I think we started off with the prior year draft.
We could give them the Act 100 and the section from the
I'm gonna, we
legislators.
did a fair amount. I mean, that took me a week or so to work on. So, and then people need to read it, right? And they need to okay it. And the annual report's been one of those things that's actually been pretty contentious within our council. You all will not have to deal with that. So yay for people. But yeah.
Wow, I didn't know.
Oh
Gee,
yeah, Mary Alice, you missed some very
I clearly
big
missed some.
debates with our prior AG and some members who I again felt very strongly about what they wanted the annual report to be. Yeah, it was very contentious, to say the least. But yeah, so I mean, it will take time to draft. We don't have a current draft, but you know, if you can work off of the prior, hopefully it won't take too long to get done. So you have a draft ready for the next meeting that could be reviewed and approved by council, or at least a draft reviewed and then tweaked and then approved at a January meeting to get it in time to OPSD by January 15th.
So is
On
I'm sorry, so is this Stephanie, do you have a draft from last year that we can look at?
Definitely. And my suggestion is that a big part of this year has been anticipating this transition right here, which we haven't, despite trying, hasn't gone very smoothly or well. And that could be a great sort of theme for that annual report, as well as, what the horizon hopefully looks like.
Right.
So-
And there usually is a section on what we hope to accomplish next year. So it could be further legislative changes to delete the annual report, et cetera.
Right. So just to follow up, then do you want to send it to me and I'll take a stab at it so that we can just try to get it on to DBED in a timely manner?
I have it. I helped. I was on the annual report committee, so I helped Steph.
Okay, yeah, we can work on
Yeah.
it. I mean, do we have to like coordinate draft? No, I don't think so, right? We can just circulate a draft. Okay,
Yeah, I think it might be worth having deciding on one person to take the first stab of the draft now. And then you'll have to get it in right before the agenda deadline to do it on, put it on whenever you folks decide to have your December meeting.
I mean, I know, Michelle, you've got exemptions and, we're all full-time working and Jay too. So, trying to expedite some time so that we're all not crunched at the meetings.
You
So
want to
Dawn's
take first
volunteering?
crack? I can send it to you today after the call.
Yeah, just send it to me and I'll take first crack. Okay.
But
Jay,
it
were you
does-
trying to say something also? Sorry, when everybody was talking at once.
No, go ahead, Michelle.
Oh no, I just thought I heard Jay try to talk when everybody was talking at once.
Oh, there were just a couple questions. One was, when is the legislative committee active again?
So usually would probably get them started this month or December. And the reason for that is because in December, we have had over the last maybe 4 or 5 years, a standing meeting with Senator Gabbard and Representative Lowen. And so I'm happy to, whoever wants to take lead on that, make the introduction by email to ask if they can meet with us. And typically that meeting is to find out what are their legislative priorities for the year. So we set up a Zoom meeting with them, and they've been very gracious the last few years just to meet with us, and they've also been very good supporters of folks who have been nominated to the council and amendments that we've asked to Chapter 343 and 341. And so I would actually, if the council wants to continue with that practice, send them an email this month to request a meeting for sometime in December via Zoom, just to go through those legislative priorities. And again, I'm happy to make the initial email to their offices and copy whoever will take over the legislative work. And again, asking them what are their legislative priorities, kind of listening to things that might be of interest to the council. And we usually ask them, how can the council be of help? When we're going through rulemaking, there were some suggestions. I mean, okay, should we make amendments to Chapter 343? Representative Lowen for many years has introduced a bill to create a Department of the Environment. Unfortunately, it still hasn't happened, but I would expect, they'd kind of look at those same, look to do something similar for that. And so once we kind of get an idea of where they're going, we report it to this council, and then the legislative committee chair monitors the bills that are introduced for anything that might either impact the council, impact rulemaking, or just general bills that, kind of fall in our wheelhouse that we're interested in following. And then you will want to, maybe at the next December meeting, authorize somebody. So in the past, I was authorized to give testimony on behalf of the council for bills, or it could be the legislative chair as well. And yeah, so the chair will monitor bills, bring it to council. We'll, the ones that are kind of moving, will continue to monitor. And I think what we can do is put you in touch, whoever is going to take over legislative committee, with Robin Kay. He was really good at creating spreadsheets, and then he would also coordinate with ERP and see what bills are ERP and OPSD monitoring, and are there any overlaps. And keeping track of when these bills come up for hearing. Do we want to provide testimony if there's a position the council really wants to take on a certain bill? If not, you can also do, individual testimony, right? But if it's something that the council is going to take a position on, we typically try to bring that up in time so that there's a meeting where we can, or if we know it's a topic we've been following for a long time, you can authorize that by council action, right, to kind of testify on those bills. Go ahead, Mary Alice. Oh, yeah.
So there's a ledge tracking process that happens. DBED refers bills to the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development on all of our topics, and including ERP topics. And so because we already have that built into our staffing, we can provide those bills that look like they would be of interest to the council without one of you having to look at all 4,000 bills that get thrown into the hopper by January 28th or whatever the deadline is this year. The Office of Planning usually gets over 200 bills, but only a portion of those, because of our broad different programs, would be ones that could be of interest to the council. So I offer that as a way to take the burden off of the 4 members, so that you would get a listing of bill numbers through the ERP staff, of ones that we're going to be tracking. And when we track, we make a decision whether we're going to testify, monitor, or, if we're not that concerned, just know the outcome at the end of the session. And we do testimony on bills that we have an interest in. And those would be separate from the councils, because you guys have policy autonomy, as all boards and commissions do. And you can take any position that you think is appropriate for your council. And rarely our testimony might differ from yours, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on bills that impact the council. And likely we would end up supporting your position.
Thank you, Mary Alice. I think that's a great offering, to offer the tracking to whoever's going to take over the legislative committee work. And in terms of, what are things that we've testified on in the past, because there usually are a lot of environmental bills, climate bills, that type of thing. Really where we focused our efforts are on bills that specifically touch HRS Chapter 343 or would otherwise create a conflict with our rules. For example, in several, I would say at least the last 2 or 3 legislative sessions, there have been efforts to implement affordable housing exemptions or just general housing exemptions into 343. But most of them have conflicted with our rules in the sense that they would expand it beyond the limits that we currently have, which are lands that are state land use urban and zoned for residential. And so we have provided, I think primarily we've provided comments in the conflict that would now create. So if there are bills that would create conflict with our current rules or expand it beyond what the rules are, we've typically either testified in opposition or commented on it. Just because, again, like the affordable housing exemption, for one, really was vetted through a lot of people. And the reason why people are okay with it was because it was already limited to urban lands. And, we've seen stuff where they wanted to expand it to state ag lands and beyond, right? So that's one example. Another example was some years back, there was an effort to add a cultural impact assessment requirement in 343. But again, that's something that's already really covered by the rules in terms of having an Act 50 having to analyze impacts to cultural resources. So we did provide comments on that bill as well. So that's typically the tenor and nature, things that specifically impact either HRS Chapter 343 or our rules, the HAR 11200.1. But that's not to say there might not be other bills that we want to support for some reason that are in our wheelhouse, right? Yeah, so I don't know if there's, again, if you guys want to do it at this meeting, but if you want to designate somebody to take charge of legislative committee, I'm happy to include that person in an intro email to request the meeting with Senator Gabbard and Rep. Lowen. In the past, it's been me as chair of the council and the chair of the legislative committee. So Robin, we do the meeting together. So that's something as well if a council chair wants to do it with whoever wants to take on legislative committee. Any volunteers?
I'll do it.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll do
Thanks,
it.
Jay.
So,
No, that's great. Okay, so I'll shoot an email out with I'll copy you and Rachel and make the introduction and let Senator Gabbard and Lowen know that we're making the transition to new members, and we do want to keep the tradition of having that December meeting with them if they're available. And it's really good actually for you folks to meet them, especially you, Jay, and Don, because you're going to be coming, everybody actually to meet them because your appointments go to his committee for Ag and Energy. Yeah, so it's good to make that meeting and just so you can kind of get to know him a little bit. And both have been, again, incredibly supportive of the council over the years.
The other question I had is, I'm trying to understand the deadlines for the annual report.
Okay.
Are we saying that it has to be submitted to or file with OPSD by January 30?
15. So
January
that
15.
they can get it into the legislature by January 30.
Okay.
Mhm.
So January 15 to OPSD.
Sorry, go
At
ahead, Steph.
one point, the annual report was going to be folded up into OPSD's annual report. And that was,
Yeah.
that had been the strategy. And then, of course, we learned that OPSD has no annual report.
No requirement to do an annual report.
No requirement to do an annual report. And sometimes the programs will do annual reports.
Right.
But nonetheless, that deadline is necessary so that OPSD can help us file it by the 30th with the ledge, which is the man. That's in the rules.
Right. Yep.
Stephanie is absolutely correct. We do not have a statutory requirement for an annual report, and we're not actually unhappy with that. DBED has an annual report, and so we always have a section in DBED's annual report, and that includes one on ERP, but it isn't your report, it's the staff report. And we also do an Act 100 report, which is going to be a different format this year. And we can send copies of to the members, just so you see what we're saying for the staff, not for the council. We don't speak for you. I think as a matter of strategy, that having your annual report, if you're going to do it this year, as a standalone, is more likely to get read by the legislators and their committee clerks and key staff than having it buried in a large multi-program annual report, which OPSD would be if we did one. And DBED certainly is. DBED has over 18 agencies, and so its annual report's going to be a monster as usual. So you could have a one-pager. My theory is that the shorter the report, the more likely it is to get read, which is very different from, I think, how the council interpreted their charge to do a really thorough review of Hawaii's environment. If many of you said, that's huge and impossible. And the definition of environment has broadened over the decades dramatically. As more and more people found things that they wanted to protect under the umbrella of environmental protection. So short is my recommendation.
Last year's report was 4 pages with pictures.
Sure.
Yay for the pictures.
Yeah, it helps it look good. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so going through the list of other things that typically happen for the council. Okay, so annual report you folks will be working on in short order, the meeting with the legislators in December. Now, once session comes up, so it'd be Dawn and Jay this year. Typically the governor's messages for your hearings will come out about March. So just keep a monitor on that, to make sure that they do in fact come out. And then usually Senator.
Oh,
Go ahead.
no, we can do that monitoring so that these guys don't have to track that. But usually the committee chairs will call you or email you and let you know when they're thinking of holding their hearing, the committee hearing, where they'll vote on advice and consent to the full Senate. And that will be another way of knowing, the GM, governor's message. We'll track that and see it, and we'll send you that. And then we'll try to send you the hearing notice as soon as it comes out, but you'll probably know ahead of that because you'll get a call from the chair to find out if you're available on that date. So I think between what we would automatically track and what can inform you of and what the information you're going to get from the committee chair, that should be covered.
Yeah, and typically Senator Gabbard's office sends a written questionnaire that they want you to fill out ahead of time, and that is made public and will be attached to your GM. And so you should go to your committee hearing in person. Usually they're not, because of the nature of the council, we've not been grilled. There's some questions and you can say a brief statement if you want, but it's usually it's usually fairly easy, especially as compared to other confirmations for other department heads and other boards and commissions. I don't know if there's any reason for that to change this year. So yeah, I mean, I think if I was confirmed, most people I think are pretty easy, to go through in terms of like, if you're working on something very controversial, I mean, that could of course come up. But thankfully, at least in the past, it hasn't for council members. So the other thing is, as chair, I mean, I typically will draft letters of support for those to submit. And then of course, if the remaining members want to do so in their individual capacity, they can as well. And ERP is usually nice and drafts letters of support, testimony and support as well. And then you folks going up if you want to try to get some folks involved. And so I won't be on the committee, but if you guys can let me know when your GMs are coming up, I'm happy to also write a letter of support in my individual capacity. Just keep me posted on when that's happening. So yeah, just as chair, and I will send Rachel a link with just all the documents that I have accumulated over the last 8 years, including the template for testimony. If you want it, if you don't, but like my past agendas, rulemaking document, like everything that I have in my council folder, I'll just send you a link so you have it. And then even for testimonies, you don't have to start from scratch, I mean, I can share that with, I guess, all 4 of you actually, if that's probably better, just to see what you folks are doing.
Donna, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Wheel has been turned already.
Yeah, and it'll probably be a lot. It'll be a Mimecast download link. That's what I have, I think. And if you guys can't access it, just let me know. Let's see. So, and then future appointments, yeah, keep working on getting more people involved. Other to do, so repeal of the procedural rules. That was something that was supposed to happen. We technically still have procedural rules 11-201, which we don't really need. So instead, you guys remember we worked on our policies document since we're just an advisory council. So I think if you guys can pick up, and I know Dawn, you were on rules committee, pick up where we need to go to actually just repeal those procedural rules, because it still talks about holding contested cases and the appeals to the council, which we don't do anymore. So I think we should just repeal those so that there's no question, except in case somebody comes back and says, hey, it says you do X, Y, and Z, and we actually don't. So that's a to do. And then always, we've been kind of trying to just keep in our minds a running list of things that we want to update with rulemaking for 11-200.1. So off the top of my head, I think further tweaks can be done to the part 1, part 2 exemptions list. And we did that PIG report that came out some months ago. And I know like Ron, for example, really doesn't think that if you don't have an exemption list, you have to publish all of your exemptions. So that's something that could be further tweaked. An issue I actually talked to Tom about this week was with withdrawal of EISPN documents. And so that's something we might want to take another look at when the document is separate from the actual determination that you need an EIS, whether or not the applicant can just withdraw it on their own. I think we can clarify that in rulemaking. Trying to think of what else. For the most part, I have not heard big issues with the rules we did in 2019. But again, and this is why we haven't gone through rulemaking again, because there's some tweaks that could make it better, but not yet anything where we're like, okay, do we want to restart rulemaking? I don't know if ERP or Allison from AG's side, if there's other things you guys want to think about that might need to be done, but that's just something to continue to monitor. And I mean, that could even be an INO forum in the future of, hey, the rules have been out, we're now on our 5-year anniversary. Let's get some stakeholders together. Let's talk about it. Are there things that are not working that you guys think we need to go back for, right? So that's a potential forum if we want to open ourselves up to that. Today, Mary Alice mentioned the Kapalkai requirement, right? I mean, do we put that in, rulemaking or not? I think further discussion can be had on that if that's something the council wants to look at. Anything else folks can think of that we've had in past discussions about potentially updating the rules? I think it's good nothing's jumping out at us because we did a pretty good job last time. So again, I think of it more in the nature of tweaks that can help, nothing major at this stage. Of course, this is the other reason why on the legislative side, we need to monitor if there are any changes to 343, chapter 343, because that could drive necessary changes in HER 11-200.1. Oh, one thing I think we might have to take out is if the rules still reference appeals to the council, because that happened post rulemaking. So that needs to come out in whatever next iteration is done. And then I think the rules actually still refer to the office instead of ERP or OPSD. So that's another cleanup edit. Those types of things that kind of stemmed from the change or the transfer of the council from DOH to OPSD. So even the rules, right? Chapter 11, right? Or Title 11 is technically Department of Health. And I think the statute contemplated that at whatever point in the future the rules are updated, then it would transition to be, what would it be? Title 15?
Title 15.
Title 15. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's that kind of cleanup stuff that needs to be done, but so far hasn't been an issue since everybody knows we've transitioned from Department of Health to OPSD. But all of that kind of stuff would need to be picked up in any further update to the rules. As for to-dos for the chair, I mean, yeah, so typically whenever you guys decide your meeting, so agendas have to be posted 6 days before, which is usually a Wednesday if we have a Tuesday meeting. And so we try to get agendas in the Friday before that, right? And so ERP does send out a reminder, usually on the 23rd-ish of the month, for council that, hey, we're having a meeting coming up. Usually it's the first Tuesday of the month is what we've kept for many, many years. the council can change that if you want to change it from the first Tuesday of the month, if that does not work. This month we pushed our meeting back because of the election holiday, or election day. And so there's flexibility. So you'll just have to track your agenda deadlines, you know, in accordance with that. And yeah, the chair really kind of determines what goes on the agenda. I keep notes from meetings on stuff that people ask to put on the agenda for next time as well. So I'll usually refer back to that in determining how to draft the agenda for the next month. And then you send your draft agenda to, you know, ERP, Mary Alice, and the AG, Allison, for review. And there's certain times where I'll actually send the draft agenda to committee chairs as well, just to see, depending on what we're trying to put on, if they need something on the full EC agenda, they need to identify that as well. If there's only 4 of you, I mean, I think it's okay to, you know, however you want to do it. If you want to consult others and say, hey, what do you guys want on the agenda this month? And then sometimes you'll get requests from members of the public on certain things where, you know, we'll agendize some of those discussions as we have in the past, and whether or not we have to agendize it to talk about it, right? Depending on what they're asking for. So I think, am I missing anything? Things we do. In terms of if media reaches out, which is not always, you know, in the past, they've designated the chair to deal with the media. We don't get a ton of those requests. I think I've had to talk to maybe like a couple of reporters throughout the 8 years, not too many. But again, you guys can change that if there's somebody else you want to be media contact. And then we do get requests sometimes from folks, right, to review their EISs and whatnot, which we've as a policy have said that that's not within our wheelhouse. Because even ERP only does that on very specific occasions, right? We don't have the bandwidth to do that, and it within the 30 days that they need us to do it. Okay, yeah, am I missing anything?
You got a lot.
I have a question. Who prepares the minutes?
So we have been so lucky, ERP staff. So it's been Kaylee. I think that's been doing it for us. Kaylee and Kim, or both.
They prepare draft minutes and then they send it to you to make sure if you want to tweak it or add anything. I mean, certainly,
But not
like
for
a
the
template for it.
committees. Not for the committees.
Just for full council, yeah. For committee meetings, it's up to the committee chairs to prepare the meeting.
I have a question. Sorry. So, you know, there's 4 of us and there's 6 committees. So do we have to be on each other's committees? So, no? Okay.
Well, and this is why I was thinking, I don't think that you need to call committee meetings for a lot of this stuff for the time being until the membership gets bigger, unless somebody tells me you are required to call for standing committees. Because I think you just put an agenda item on the full EAC agenda, with the exception, and Michelle, if you disagree, but I think exemption still does need to have its own hour, or just make your meeting longer, depending on what process you're going to go
Well, for
through.
minutes,
yeah,
get done if we're part of the full council meeting. That's an advantage because I spend a long time doing meeting minutes. A long time.
Yeah. So I'll defer to you guys on how you want to continue to do your meetings, really. I think there's flexibility there.
Okay. So before it'd be Michelle, you and I, and whoever else on Michelle's committee. But now as we transition, it's going to be the whole council for Michelle, helping her with exemptions.
If that's what you choose. I mean, the exemption committee could be a 2-person committee, right? If that's the case where it makes more sense with those who do exemptions to kind of do the first meeting and get that list better in shape before you bring it to full council. But I'll really just defer to you guys on how you want to do that.
Probably makes sense to keep it separate. Otherwise, everybody will get bogged down in all those details, and it can just be us done. bogged down in those details.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Just for procedurally, if folks apply under boards and commissions and boards and commissions, is there a chance that they could still have time to be nominated by the governor for this upcoming session?
Mhm.
Sure. Governor can make interim appointments up until the first day of the opening of the legislature. That means that that person can be seated immediately. And then after the legislature opens, the governor sends down nominations, but the person can't be seated on the board until after they've been confirmed. And then the date on their governor's message, if that's the one adopted by the Senate, tells you when the first date of their term starts. And so for this board, I would anticipate that each nominee would have two governor's messages, one from the date of appointment to June 30th, and then one from January 1st to, the end of their term. That's kind of the way they normally do it, but it could be, presumably. So there's two different ways to nominate. One is interim between the adjournment of the last session and the opening date of the current upcoming session. And so we've still got 6 weeks where the governor can make an interim appointment. And then for that gap after opening, he can only make nominations.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. It's just just thinking about, I've tried to get a number of folks to apply, but sounds like this is actually a reasonably good time because interim appointments are are useful, but ideally they are nominated and confirmed to really get them going. And so knowing that there's still time for for folks to get into that part of the pipeline is helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, that's good. And I just checked, Michelle and Rachel, your terms are through 2026, so there's time. So even for the next legislative session, you don't have to worry.
Right.
But okay. Steph, Tessie, Mary, any other knowledge you want to impart on committees you served on? I know, Steph, you gave a lot of good information for annual report committee, or just any other tips and tricks, I guess.
Well, Dawn has all of my institutional knowledge, so we're good.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, I think that's pretty much it for succession. And I'm sorry, this was a very kind of like a spitball training. But yeah, I mean, for everybody but Jay, you folks have seen kind of how we do things on the council, how we run the meetings. And again, you guys can call me anytime. I think most of all of you, like not all of you, have my phone number, email. I am happy to join some of the meetings as a member of the public. I probably won't come to all of them, but yeah, Michelle, if you guys need me to do the next exemptions committee, I think, well, depending on when you have a meeting, I might be able to attend. I might be on a trip, just because I know we're kind of in the middle of a DOE list. But yeah, call me anytime. I'm happy to talk story with people. I don't always check my Gmail email address, but I do. I'm responsive to text messages and calls, generally. So if there are other questions, we still have a couple items to go. Oh, sorry, was somebody talking? Okay, I was gonna say just ask questions as we go along. But if not, we'll move on. Mary Alice, do you have any update from the director?
No.
Nothing? Okay.
Oh, actually, I do. I want to thank you, Onauna, for your amazing taking on more of a board and commission chair than most of the boards and commissions that I've seen over the years. And I really appreciate the fact that you stuck with it and done such a marvelous job. And I want to thank the other members who have already reached their maximum term. So Mary, Stephanie, and Tessie, thank you so much for doing as much as you have done over the years. So that was my only message. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and likewise, I mean, yeah, thanks to everybody currently serving and served in the past. I mean, we couldn't have accomplished what we did without the good group that we had, and it's because everybody was really willing to put in the time and the effort and the brain power. So it's a little bittersweet. 8 years went by really quickly, surprisingly, right? So I'm definitely very proud of everything that we accomplished together, and I hope that this council continues because I do think it's important. I know we've been in a little bit of a self-esteem slump in a way because of not getting folks appointed, but it's still, really great group of people. I'm so glad I've met all of you and the contacts that we've made. And I know that we'll continue to keep in touch. So it's not like I'm never gonna see folks, right? But yeah, just very, very appreciative of everybody's efforts, and to the remaining members. I mean, I think you guys will do great. Thank you everybody for your service. I mean, because it is really just it's a volunteer work, right? But it's been really good work and great learning experience for me. Not everybody gets to go through that type of a intense rule making process. So I mean, we've all learned so much with this. So yeah.
I would have to say that the rulemaking process was, which was 2 years, right?
More. I think it was about 2.5 by the time
Yeah.
we came
What-
on, that
The
others
things
had
that we
started.
learned in that, or that I learned, that was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you guys want to learn some more, just start rulemaking again.
And Mary, thanks for paying for someone for INO out of your own pocket, for all the things that we had to put up with in the committee. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll hold some amazing INO meetings in the future with
You
4
guys,
people.
make sure we know about them so we can be in your audience.
Yeah.
Right. So you can heckle us.
Yeah. And to add to the to-do list, I mean, funding requests, I think we did put in funding requests in the past, and as I'm looking through my folders, you'll see that. We weren't successful, especially going into COVID years. But if there are very specific things you're planning, and I'm thinking like the cultural guidance efforts, right? If you think you're gonna do trips on other islands, I mean, there may be, funding through OPSD, although we hate to take from other departments. But if there's a real good reason or good event that you're doing, I mean, can try to just put that budget request in, and have, them introduce it as a bill, right? So that's one thing to talk. So keep in mind, those are the types of things that you can do. You might not get it, but you can at least ask.
Wanan is so kind. I would say do not bite off the cultural stuff at all unless you have funding to do it.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, and there may be other like maybe OHL will throw some money to that, CNHA, right? I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be legislative funding. But yeah, I think
Now that you got
that's
Kai,
great. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, there's ways to get things done, but yeah, I'm very sad, very appreciative of you all. Okay, sorry, we do have just a little bit more business before wrapping up. Next up is the review and adoption of the August meeting minutes. Do folks need a little bit more time to review? And only the current members can vote on it. So. You folks want a couple minutes or?
No.
All right.
I'm good.
Okay, and somebody can make a motion, and Rachel, I'll let you run this your first motion.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Jay.
A second.
Thank you, Michelle. All those in favor? That was all of us. I saw Michelle's hand up. Any opposed? Or that was everyone. So do you still do opposed and abstentions if everyone has raised their hands.
I'll note it for the record that there aren't, because it technically, if there's somebody opposed, you have to do a roll call vote. But
Right.
if it's unanimous, then you just say, none opposed, and then usually ask for abstentions as well. But since it was unanimous, yeah. So it's in the minutes. Okay. Thank you, folks. And then I will pass it to Michelle for the exemption committee update.
Thank you. We met today. DOE was unable to attend the call. They emailed their apologies, but they've already sent us a red line strikeout version of the list. So we met with them back in June. I think was our last meeting with them. June, where we talked about, in July, we met with DOE, discussed their list, and last month they sent us a revised list, but it is essentially a new list. So we've got to, and it tripled in length. So we need a little bit more time to go through that list. But Don and I will do that. Onana too, as a member of the public, if she's so inclined. And we'll send those comments to DOE, and I'll invite them to meet next month so we can review those and hopefully get a list that we can bring to full council to publish in the environmental notice. That's it. There's no other lists right now.
Thanks, Michelle. And then the only other item was discussion of the revised exemption guidance, which we don't have any further comments on that. And actually, Tom said that he is going to make some revisions based on recent discussions he's had with agencies on, to address particular questions that they've had. So I think that'll come up in a future meeting. So I think that's one of the other things on the to-do list, is to finalize that exemption guidance. Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. Thank you.
No, thank you. Okay, so remaining committee members, I tentatively put December 3rd as your next meeting, just because that's the first Tuesday of the month. Of course, you folks can change that meeting date if you want. And typically at the December meeting is when we decide if we're going to keep first Tuesdays of the month for the next year, or if you guys want to choose some other date. That date happened to work with the membership's schedules at that time. Usually when it is an election year, I think for November, we will push the meeting to the second Tuesday of the month. And then, even for January, if you guys don't want to have a meeting, the day, what is it first? I mean, it's a couple of January. Yeah, January 3rd is, a couple of days after New Year's. It's up to you. So you do have flexibility on when you want to set your regular meetings. And then of course you also have the ability to call special meetings when it's not your regular meeting. So I'll leave that for you folks to decide if you want to set the December meeting now on a certain date. You can have that discussion.
The December meeting works for me. Michelle, Don, Jay.
Like me.
The 3rd, right? You said? Did we say December?
Yes, December 3rd.
Yes, I'm available.
I'm available.
So agendas will be due to ERP then next week, Friday, November 22nd, because they need to be posted by the following Wednesday. Okay. Yeah, so I think one of the agenda items you can add on is just talking about meetings for 2025. Rachel, for the full council, you guys can decide.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else? And again, I just want to mahalo everybody for your service, and ERP staff and OPSD as well for helping us all these many years. And again, I'm sure I'll see you folks, and I'll be calling you folks, and really appreciate everybody's service and dedication. So it's been such a pleasure. I've learned so much.
Thank you so much, Onana, and Mary and Tom and Allison.
All right. Well, I won't keep you
I
guys
have
any
so much
longer.
respect for all of you. Thank you for all your patience with me being a non-environment person.
You're good, Mary. We learned a lot from you too. Hey,
Yeah.
That's why we like having the broad membership, right? Is to look at things from a lot of different perspectives.
Yes, he's so quiet but kind. Always had snacks for us at the bar, right?
All right, folks. Well, I'm gonna, if there's nothing else, just checking. Okay. I'm gonna adjourn our meeting. It's 2:58 p.m. Thanks so much, everybody, for your time. And Allison, thanks for being a great AG and advising us as well. I think we got everybody. Okay.
All right.
Thanks, folks.
Aloha.
All right. Meeting adjourned. Take care, everybody.
Aloha, mahalo,
Thank you. Happy holidays.
happy holidays.
Happy holidays.